So you started the year out with good intentions, but few people actually gain true clarity on what they really intend to do this year, how they really intend to lead, how they really intend to show up. We do resolutions, we do things like that, but do we actually have clarity on what you truly intend to lead with? Many of us feel busy, we feel scattered, we feel overwhelmed by ambiguity. I saw a piece of data that said if 38% of employees today say that they truly understand what's expected of them, then 62% do not. You see where I started out there? If 38% of employees today say that they truly understand what's expected of them, that's the data set. 38% of employees say they truly know what's expected of them. That means 62% do not know what's expected of them. That's a clarity crisis. And it starts at the top. We know this, but do we really know it? Really? Are we acting on it as a leadership team? Clarity is not a soft skill leadership trait. It's the highest form of leadership. Without it, decisions falter, teams drift, and intentions fade. I have worked with leaders in the past. I've worked with the CEO in the past that could not make a decision to save his life. Just couldn't make a decision. And to me, that's a backbone. If you are not well researched, well educated, decisive enough to make a decision, you should not be steering the ship. And if that's hard to hear, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, not sorry, right? If you are a leader and you can't make a decision, there's a few things at play here. You either are not self-confident enough in yourself. You've got imposter syndrome so hardcore. You are a people pleaser so hardcore that you can't make a decision, or you are working with an executive leadership team that you either don't trust, they're changing the goalpost on you, whatever, so you don't really know what decision to make. Either way, you either need to figure it out for yourself or move on. Nobody wants to be in an organization where they don't know what success looks like. And I'm speaking to you as a leader. I'm speaking to you as an employee. So by the end of this episode, my goal is this. I want you to clarify your purpose for the year, define your leadership intentions, align your team and your priorities, and then take 3 actionable steps before the week ends. I put these episodes out on Tuesday. You've got time. And you know what? If you don't pick this up till a Friday, then until the weekends of the following week. I'm trying to give you a timeline so that way you actually do it. The timeline doesn't necessarily matter. The fact that you're doing it actually matters. So why does clarity matter so much? Clarity isn't just mental peace. It drives performance. It drives alignment. It drives retention in your organization. And it also drives execution, which is tied to the bottom line. So does performance. It's tied to the bottom line. Alignment is tied to the bottom line. All of these things matter. So leaders who provide clarity drive better performance because it's the strongest predictor of team results. I read this on HubSpot the other day. Leaders who provide clarity drive better performance because it's the strongest predictor of team results. Clear goals help 80% of individuals perform better, and companies using OKRs see 31% higher returns. And when people don't understand expectations, it contributes to disengagement and fractured focus at work. And goodness knows we're all struggling with focus enough without causing extra reasons. So there have been times where I have felt unclear. I worked at a big public university system, and I knew what I wanted to accomplish, but it was unclear to me how to actually get it accomplished. And that's because we were what's called a consensus-driven organization. And so we had it was death by committees. And I see the reason why committees get put into place for checks and balances. I'm not saying committees are overall bad, but I had this one human resources committee that pulled in a leader from each of these. Essentially, I was in a system, right? So then I had 4 universities and a healthcare facility that all came up through this HR committee. And so what I would have to do to get something accomplished is I'd have to visit each of these individuals separately. And that would take me about 4 weeks to do. And I'd have to do that before the HR committee meeting and then see who was on board with me and who it wasn't. So I'd have pre-meetings, I'd have the meeting, and then I'd have to have post-meetings to get anything accomplished. And what did it cost me? Momentum. It cost me momentum. I couldn't get anything accomplished. And ultimately, it cost me my job because I couldn't work there anymore. I had to move on. I could not work in an environment where I couldn't make decisions. And so what I ended up doing in a lot of cases was just making decisions and then asking for forgiveness later. And that doesn't really work in that situation either. So for me, I learned that I couldn't work in the public sector. But for a lot of people, it just causes them to feel like what they're doing doesn't matter. And then if the leader feels that way, how do their employees feel? Either completely shielded from the process or they feel frustrated too. There's also been times where I've had so much clarity that it's given me a breakthrough in focus. There was one organization I was working at where I got chosen from a group of leaders across the US. We all flew to Cincinnati, Ohio, of all places. And we had this meeting. And I was learning so much from my peers. We were getting raw and real with each other about the way things were working. This is when I was in insurance. And I got so much clarity on essentially how to measure performance among support staffs. That's very specific, but that's what I was getting clarity on, that I felt like I was able to come back and blaze a trail because I had a ton of clarity and I had the authority to be able to act on that clarity. The real leverage of your leadership isn't what you do necessarily. It's how clearly you point the way for others. And if you aren't decisive, if you don't have clarity on where you're trying to go, where the organization is trying to go, you're not going to get anywhere. So let's talk about the anatomy of leadership clarity. I'm going to break clarity down into 3 leadership dimensions here. I took some time to think about it because so many of us talk about clarity, and clarity is not my word of the year. My word of the year is leverage, and I can go into that on another episode. But clarity and alignment are things that I see a lot of people talking about out there on social media, I guess I should say, when I say out there. And so I was thinking, like, how do we get clarity? If we're a leader, why does clarity matter and how do we get clarity? And so the 3 leadership dimensions when it comes to clarity is, here's the way I look at it. 1 is clarity of your purpose. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this as a person? What are your motives and intentions? Why does your organization exist? Why does your department exist? Does your team feel the North Star of what success looks like in their roles, what success looks like for your department, and then how that impacts success for the organization, and what does success look like for the organization? So right now, if you're not driving, write down like one sentence that answers why this. So think about an initiative you're working on, thinking about the purpose of your team, your role. Why this now? Why did I choose this role right now? Why am I choosing to lead this team right now? Why did I choose to join this team right now? Why are we working on this initiative right now? And if it feels too complex, then it's not clear yet. And you have to have clarity of purpose. Why this now? Why do I want to buy this farm now? Why do I want to go back to work now? Why do I want my teenager to succeed in X, Y, and Z right now? Why? Why this right now? And if it feels too complex for you to answer, then you don't have enough clarity. So that's clarity of purpose. Second is clarity of expectations. I mentioned this. What does success look like? Who owns what? Whether you're doing a RACI model or something different, and RACI is responsible, accountable, who you want to consult is the C, and then who needs to be included or updated, essentially. That's the RACI model. So every time you're working through an initiative, if you do RACI, who's responsible for this, who's accountable to this, who needs to be consulted on this, and then who needs to be included. That's the RACI model. But clarity of expectations, who owns what? And I would recommend you spend 60 seconds to answer, what is one thing that I must stop doing so my team can move faster? And I'm wondering, so many of my leaders do this that I work with. I consult leaders every single day. So many of them are pushing meetings with their team. If you've listened to my show before, you have heard me harp on this before. If you're pushing meetings with your team, either change the cadence of your meetings or stop freaking doing that. If your team needs to move faster, you probably need more communication and more collaboration, not less. But what is the one thing that you need to stop doing so your team can move faster? And maybe it's taken for granted that they know what the purpose is, that they have clarity. Maybe they don't. What does success look like for the organization, for the department, for your team, for the individuals on the team? And what does it look like in your personal life too? So clarity of purpose, clarity of expectations. And the third is clarity of communication. Less jargon, more direction. We feel like we're saying a lot, and most of the time we're not saying a whole lot that actually matters. Repetition is important here. Not making assumptions is important here. That's what embeds clarity. So if I were you, I'd pick one phrase this week and repeat it everywhere. In your meetings, in your Slack channel, or on your Teams channel, whatever, in your emails. What is one phrase that you can pick this week that will drive home what it is you are trying to accomplish? Whether you're trying to reinforce a policy on your team because you've seen some things wavering around accountability, whether you are trying to get a certain outcome with clients or with products or services, whatever it is, pick one phrase and repeat it everywhere, in every meeting, on your communication, internal communication channels, on your email, all of that. Clarity isn't a solo perception. It's something that leaders create for others through consistent communication. We just can't take for granted that people understand. Complexity feels smart, but clarity feels like leadership. So let's talk about the cost of unclarity and what leaders lose. Unclarity. What's the cost when we're not clear? I don't know if I've ever said unclarity. I don't even know if that's a word. I should look that up. So I want to contrast what happens with clarity and what happens without clarity. So without clarity, teams lose confidence, and therefore they have slower decision making because they're not confident in themselves. They're not confident in their leader. They're not confident in what this is going to mean to the bottom line or how this is going to impact their performance review or whatever it is. So then they're slower. If you've ever heard me talk about The Speed of Trust by Stephen M. R. Covey, it talks about trust dividends and trust taxes, that every choice that we make is either building trust or disintegrating trust, which is building trust would be the dividend payout or disintegrating would be the tax on trust. But when teams lose confidence, they have slower decision making. If they lose confidence in each other, if they lose confidence in their leader, if they lose confidence in their CEO, if they lose confidence in the market, if whatever it is, then they're slower to make decisions and then business slows down. Leaders are unconsciously performing firefighting instead of moving forward in their leadership, and engagement drops when people don't know expectations. I once led a project that we had sold majority share of our company. So we were converting some items on tech. We thought we were aligned with the organization who had purchased the majority share of our business, and we weren't even changing technology. We were just changing some of the things that we did inside of technology. And so we felt like we were aligned. Well, the further we got down the path, the more we realized if this organization really wanted good reporting from us, then we would need to fill out some fields that we hadn't filled out before. And when I'm saying we, my support team, I was the COO. So the support staff are going to have to do more, better, and different. And we had essentially, when all of this had happened, we had said nothing's going to change. We had thought we were aligned, but we weren't. And so then I had to go back to my support staff and say that some things were going to have to change. We could lead the charge in it. We could do it first and then write the templates on how everyone else should do it. But still, people were pissed, right? So people lost trust. People didn't understand. People lost confidence. We had slower decision making from that because then they were thinking, well, gosh, we know how it needs to work inside of our agency, but will this work inside of all the agencies? It was a bummer. Confusion isn't neutral. It actually drains culture and capacity. It's not, if people are confused, it's not like, oh, we just keep plugging along. We're damaging our culture. We're damaging our capacity to accomplish things. So I want to introduce some actionable micro activities, some little activities that you as listeners can do today for a clarity reset. So here's the first activity that I recommend that you do. This is 3 sentences of intent. And this is an activity that I've done with executive teams before, trying to get them on the same path. And then we did it with the middle manager teams, and it really helped us to get all on the same page. And then we essentially did kind of like a word cloud activity, a little more complicated than that, to determine what the overall leadership North Star was. So my leadership purpose this year is, and fill in the blank. What is your leadership purpose this year? And then my team's expectations are X, Y, and Z. They're going to be reliable. They're going to be consistent. We're going to have minimal mistakes, 3 mistakes or less. We're going to respond to clients within 48 hours, whatever your specifics are. My leadership purpose this year is fill in the blank. My team's expectations are fill in the blank. And then my non-negotiable priorities are fill in the blank. If you do that at the executive level, and then you look at themes across executives, that's going to help with your leadership North Star. If you do that with your middle managers, your team leads, that's going to really help you determine your intent for the year with your business. And if you're not listening to this till March, who gives a crap? If you haven't done it already, it's time to do it. So the second activity is a clarity check. Ask your team or yourself, but it'd be good to get your whole team in a room together and say, all right, can you define success for our team in one sentence? And have this be a solo activity. Everybody writes it down. And then I'd recommend going around and reading them out loud to hear what everyone says, and then look for a theme, and then really have a success statement for your team based off of that. It's a rally cry. Do you know your roles and responsibilities clearly? Now, most employees are going to say, yes. Okay, what is your role on the team? What is it in one sentence? My role is to respond to clients within 48 hours and keep customer satisfaction high, whatever it is. And then what responsibilities do you have on a daily and weekly basis that satisfy that role? You'll get real data on clarity gaps really quickly. It's going to be probably a mind-blowing activity for you. Just those 2 things on the clarity check. Can you define success in one sentence for our team or for our organization if you're on the executive team? And then do you know your role and your responsibilities clearly? And man, I've done this with teams before, and I've had employees say some things that I'm like, what in the heck? How do we actually get there? How did we get so far away from what would be helpful to moving the business forward? If the business has, let's say, 3 objectives for the year, and a person's role and responsibilities don't roll up to those business objectives, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're not going to meet your business objectives if every single person's role and responsibilities don't ultimately roll up to impact those company objectives. That's the clarity check. The third activity I recommend that you do is this, I call it a compass review. That might sound a little bit cheesy, but every week, just asking, what did we finish this week? What are we aiming for next week? And what's blocking us? It's kind of like you can do 3 highs, 3 lows. There's a lot of different activities you can do, but I love this kind of weekly review, weekly compass, whatever you want to call it. I said North Star earlier, so I kind of keeping it with that theme. I live on a farm in the middle of the forest, and so I kind of like that theme. But at the end of the week, having a team meeting, and a lot of us do team meetings at the start of the week to set the pace. Great. That's fine too. But I like a recap at the end of the week. And I've done this with my team members before, where when I was managing a bigger team, I would have everybody send me their 3 highs and their 3 lows, and then any questions that they had for me over email. And then I would read over those over the weekend and see, and I would compile our team's accomplishments. And then I would outline what we said we were going to accomplish for the next week. And then any obstacles that existed, I would get to work on those. And then on Mondays, I would send out a recap to everyone and say, here's everything that we accomplished last week. We're coming in with a ton of momentum. Let's keep going. Here's what we said we're going to accomplish this week. And that just helps them to see a little oversight from me as the leader of, okay, you did this. Good job. We're going to celebrate that. And then you said you're going to do this, and I'm listening. I'm watching. I'm waiting. And here's the role I'm going to play to remove any obstacles or barriers that you might have. As a leader, if you do that, it's going to be great, but don't just let that information sit there. Track that, or if you've got an assistant, have them track that with you or put it in Asana or whatever project tool that you've got. And then at the end of the week, the things that they finished, were they the things that they said that they would finish? And if not, why not? Are we going to shelf those things? Are we pushing them to next week? Why? and so on and so forth. That is a great accountability tool, but also a celebration tool. So let's shift from concept to leadership posture here. I want to do some reflection and some integration with you so that way you know really how to move forward. Because I've given you some good ideas of what to put into place, but conceptually, how do you gain clarity as a leader? And I just want to ask, what ambiguity are you carrying right now that's costing your team bandwidth, decision making, or momentum? And there have been seasons where the ambiguity was me. Did I feel like I loved being a leader on this team? Did I feel like I was congruent with the other executives on the organization? And did I feel like I could succeed? Therefore, my team could succeed. And sometimes that's us as the leader, right? Sometimes we're in a wobbly place in our leadership, and then we're asking our employees to knock it out of the park. But here we are, like a little wobbly as a leader. What ambiguity are you carrying right now that's costing your team either bandwidth because they're moving in a bunch of different directions? It's costing them decision making because they have low confidence in you or themselves or each other, or it's costing momentum because you don't have clarity on the direction. I'd love it if you would define one area that would make you just a little clearer this week. And sometimes that's making a hard choice. Sometimes it's making a hard decision on what you're going to do next. But whatever it is, if it's appropriate, share it with your team. Share it with accountability for yourself. Share it with discipline. Here's what I'm going to do to rectify this. And repetition. I'm going to share it and I'm going to share it again. So if you want to support lifting ambiguity, sharpening leadership direction, and leading with intention, I would love to work with you and your team this year. You can go to either kerriroberts.com/contact, or you can go to saltlightadvisors.com/contact. But I've got a leadership framework that I'm working one-on-one with people. I usually work with organizations. That's my bread and butter. I do fractional work, which is outsourced HR. And then I've also got my program HR in a Box, which if this is the first time you're listening, then congratulations. But if you've tuned in before, you know, I love my HR in a Box program. Gosh dang, it's the most affordable way to work with me. It's a group setting and it's for businesses that typically have between 5 and 30 employees. We've got some up to 50 employees, but most generally it's a small business that does not have an HR person. And they're using this as a way to kind of springboard, build their foundation. And then we've got the fractional work. But in 2026, depending on when you're listening to this, I'm opening up one-on-one work with me. And I've got either a 1-day intensive or I've got a 3-session intensive. So if you go to kerriroberts.com, you can see a coaching area where you can work with me. And then also, I highly recommend that you subscribe to my podcast. Just subscribe to my show. I'm actually not even calling it a podcast anymore. I am on Apple and Spotify. So maybe you're just listening to the audio version, but my YouTube channel is my largest following, and that's where I'm growing the most. And I also put shorts out there. I put a couple leadership insights every single week. So I highly, highly recommend and also would love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss those weekly leadership insights. You can also sign up at saltlightadvisors.com/contact for my weekly HR newsletter. And it's not something boring. I'm putting insights out there that are going to be really helpful to help you lead and run your business. And I would also love it if you share this episode with another leader who's ready for some clarity in 2026. Let it be easy, right? Let it be easy, but it's not going to be easy if it's not clear. Leadership is not about just moving fast. It's about knowing where you're moving and why. And I understand that leading others and even leading ourselves can feel chaotic, but the work is worth it. So don't waste the chaos, folks. Embrace it. Till next time.